How could one single battle, fought in a remote province most people have never heard of, end up dragging the United States into one of its longest and most controversial wars? Well, today, we're going to dig into exactly that. How the forgotten Battle of Ba Gia in 1965 became the critical tipping point that Americanized the Vietnam War.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's early 1965, and the leadership in North Vietnam is thinking way bigger. This quote right here from Party Secretary Le Duan, it says it all. The plan wasn't about small-scale guerrilla hits anymore. The new strategy was to go big, to fight conventional set-piece battles, and to literally annihilate the South Vietnamese army, division by division.
And this new thinking, this new aggressive strategy, it all comes together in what they called the 1965 Summer Offensive. The goal was as simple as it was brutal. Smash the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN, and tie down all their best units, hoping the whole South Vietnamese government would just crumble.
You know, they weren't doing this in a vacuum. In early '65, support from their allies just poured in. China was pushing them to ramp things up. The Soviet Union delivered some serious hardware. We're talking modern MiG fighter jets and surface-to-air missiles. With all this new muscle, Hanoi felt ready to make its move. And the very first domino they decided to push over was in a little place called Ba Gia.
So, who is actually on the ground for this clash in Quang Ngai province? On one side, you had the South Vietnamese, the ARVN. They brought elements of their 51st Infantry, but also some of their elite troops, Rangers and Marines. These were supposed to be some of their best soldiers, and facing off against them, the Viet Cong's 1st Regiment. Now, this wasn't some ragtag militia. This was a tough, experienced main force unit led by a seasoned commander.
Now this is where it gets really clever. This wasn't just going to be a head-on fight. The Viet Cong had set up a brilliant and absolutely devastating trap, specifically designed to lure the ARVN right into a kill zone.
It all kicked off just before the sun came up on May 29th. Viet Cong forces hit a small, lightly defended village. But see, this attack wasn't the real prize. It was just the bait. It was the cheese in the mousetrap, perfectly calculated to make the local ARVN command do something predictable.
And boy, did the ARVN walk right into it. They sent out the 1st Battalion of their 51st Regiment to go deal with the attack. But as this battalion marched out, the main Viet Cong force, which had been hiding in prepared ambush sites on a nearby mountain, just pounced. Before the ARVN knew what was happening, they were completely surrounded.
And for the ARVN troops caught out in the open, it was an absolute slaughter. They were totally surprised, totally outmaneuvered, and the entire battalion was basically just erased from the map. And the most shocking part? It took less than an hour.
Let that number sink in for a second. 217. That's how many ARVN soldiers, including their commander, were captured just in that first phase of the ambush. Barely anyone managed to get away.
But the fight wasn't over. You'd think after a disaster like that they'd regroup, right? Nope. The South Vietnamese command decided to double down, and in doing so, they sent an even bigger force straight into an even deadlier trap. So on May 30th, they put together this huge new task force. They were bringing in the big guns now, another infantry battalion, their elite Marines, their Rangers, all of it backed up with armored personnel carriers, heavy artillery, and crucially, American air support. The plan was to go back in, retake Ba Gia, and rescue any survivors.
The real heart of the battle, though, was for this one piece of high ground, Mount Chop Nan. The ARVN's elite 39th Rangers fought their way to the top and secured it. But here's the thing. The Viet Cong had already snuck around behind them. They cut the Rangers off from their support, and then, all day and all night, they just hammered them. By the next morning, the Ranger Battalion was gone.
And by the time it was all over on May 31st, the numbers were just staggering. 367. That's how many South Vietnamese soldiers were captured or just vanished, gone. And that's on top of all the others who were killed or wounded. The whole task force was completely shattered.
Now, look at these numbers. This is what really tells the story. The RVN lost nearly 500 men, killed, captured, or missing. The Viet Cong? They lost 84. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a rout. And that kind of lopsided result, well, it sent a massive shockwave through the commands in both Saigon and all the way back in Washington.
Okay, so why are we talking so much about this one battle? Because its real impact wasn't on a map of Vietnam. It was in the minds of the decision-makers, thousands of miles away in the White House.
Yeah, they literally gave it a name, the Ba Gia effect.
The battle hammered home a terrifying realization for President Johnson and his top advisors. If even the ARVN's best units could get wiped out this easily, what hope did they have of winning the war by themselves? The answer, it seemed, was not much.
So this all lands on the president's desk, and in July of 1965, his Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, lays it out plain. He basically says, Mr. President, you've got 3 choices, and none of them are easy. We can cut our losses and get out. We can keep doing what we're doing now, or we can go all in and massively expand our commitment.
And right there, faced with what he saw as the imminent collapse of South Vietnam, Johnson makes the call that will define his presidency and an entire generation. He chose option 3. He decided to commit the United States to a major ground war. He was going to Americanize the conflict.
And the change was instant, and it was dramatic. You can see it right here. The U.S. immediately authorized 44 combat battalions for Vietnam. Troop levels just exploded, jumping from 75,000 to 125,000 by the end of the year. And believe me, that was just the beginning. The entire nature of the war had just changed. Forever.
And it just really makes you think, doesn't it? A battle most of us have never heard of, in a place most of us couldn't find on a map, ends up directly leading to this massive American intervention. It really makes you wonder, what other tiny little hinges are swinging massive historical doors right now, completely unnoticed?